Wesley Victor Wentela, and I was born on November 7th, 1925.
Okay, and then the branch of service.
I was in the U.S. Army in the 714th Light Maintenance Ordnance Company, a part of the 89th Infantry Division.
And the highest rank?
I was a staff sergeant.
And where you served?
I served in the European Theater of Operation, and that included France, Luxembourg, Germany, and Austria.
What were you doing before you joined the military?
I graduated from Champion High School in June of 1943, and then I worked on the section, the railroad section, until January when I was drafted.
And let's see, do you remember how you felt about Japan or the war in Europe prior to Pearl Harbor?
No, I didn't have any feeling until Pearl Harbor.
Do you remember the day Pearl Harbor was attacked?
December 7th, 1941.
And let's see, you said you were drafted.
Yes.
Okay. What did you envision this would be like after you were drafted?
Well, I didn't know. There's been, from my hometown, there were hundreds of men that had been drafted. So I thought, if they could survive basic training and Army training, I could do it too, because I was in very good physical condition, being an athlete as well as working as a laborer on the railroad.
And because I don't know how this works, when you are drafted, are you given a choice of the branch of service?
You had a choice.
And so why did you choose your branch?
There's no particular reason. My father was a veteran of World War I and World War II.
What do you remember about your first days in the military?
I was a little apprehensive, but here again, I was a young fellow, and I knew that I could do anything that they would want of me.
Do you remember anything about boot camp?
I was drafted, and I went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and then from Fort Sheridan, Illinois, I was sent down to Camp Blanding, Florida, for 17 weeks of basic training, and that consisted of 6 weeks of infantry training, and then the rest of the basic training was in communications.
So was that hard? Any of that really hard? Or?
No. Okay. No, it was a breeze for a young fellow, 18 years old. As far as boot camp, we called it basic training, and the last day of basic training, I was on guard duty that particular night, and my route was to march around some non-commissioned officers, let's see, what shall I say, a barracks or a hut. There was 5-man huts, and each time I walked around this hut, I could hear something, so as I kept walking around, I'd go slower and slower each time. And finally I realized that the Normandy invasion was taking place as I was making my rounds and on guard duty. And then, of course, a couple of days later, then I was through with my basic training, and I had the chance to go home for about a 10-day furlough before reporting for overseas duty at Fort Meade, Maryland. And when I got to Fort Meade, Maryland, they said 18-year-olds who are not assigned to a regular Army outfit, they do not go overseas as infantry replacement. So then I was sent down to Camp Butner, North Carolina, where I joined the 89th Infantry Division. And because of my typing abilities, I wound up in the office of the 714th Ordnance Light Maintenance Company.
So where did you learn how to type?
That was in high school. You had to type 30 words a minute for 5 minutes with 5 or less errors.
So did everyone at your high school take typing? Or?
I would say 90% did.
Okay, did you do any advanced training?
No, I did not. I did have some communications training in Camp Blanding, Florida. That was climbing poles and laying out wire, but this was right after the Normandy invasion, and the U.S. lost a lot of soldiers during the invasion of Normandy, and that's why they needed a lot of soldiers as replacements. But I did not go overseas at that time because of my young age.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, where did you go during the war? Where were you stationed first? You might have already said that. So where did you go during the war?
Okay, I went from Champion to to Marquette, then back to Champion, then to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and from Fort Sheridan, Illinois to Camp Blanding, Florida, and from Camp Blanding, Florida to Fort Meade, Maryland. From Fort Meade, Maryland, I went to Camp Butner, North Carolina, and from Camp Butner, North Carolina to Camp Miles Standish, ready to go overseas. And then, of course, overseas, well, you never did stay too long in any one place.
So when you went overseas, where was the first place you went? Where did you land?
I think, Blange, France. We got off at Le Havre, France. And we had to get on what they call LCIs because the harbor was damaged where you just couldn't get off the boat and walk on a pier. So you had to get on these landing craft infantry, which are LCIs, and they would take you to shore. And then we got on the back end of trailers, and they took us to Camp Lucky Strike in France. That's just an old German airfield. And it was spring breakup at the time that we landed, the latter part of January. And we were walking in mud almost knee deep. And we stayed in tents.
So it was because of the rain and everything?
Rain and spring breakup.
Okay. Let's see here. What were you doing during the war? What job assignments did you have?
I was basically in the office, doing office work. And then I did, being in an ordnance company, our main responsibility was to repair small vehicles, Jeeps, 2.5 ton 4x4s, and maybe 4-ton trucks, and weapons carriers. And then we were also responsible for providing ammunition for the entire division. My job was an administrative position, so I did not get out in the field.
Okay, and that was the next question, is did you see combat?
We were subject to some of the things that you have in combat, like you get airplane bombardment. We did have some of that.
And then what was your most memorable experience? This is what you were doing in the war. Can you tell me about your most memorable experiences?
I would say probably we got in the latter part of the war, and that was when the Germans were on the run. They were in France and they were defeated, so they were heading back towards Berlin to the eastern part of Germany. So the German troops were really on the run, and I think our outfit traveled at least 200 miles in the short period of time that we were involved in warfare, even as an ordnance company, because we were not out in the front lines. We were in the back part. And I guess one of the awful things that I did see is I visited a concentration camp known as Ohrdruf. And our division, along with another division, we overran that concentration camp, and I had the opportunity of visiting the camp the day after it was overrun. And
so when you say overrun, does that mean it was the people were free at the day before you got there?
That's right. They were not free. They were still being held by the Germans. So just as soon as I got into that concentration camp, there's about 20 bodies that were on the ground who had been shot by the Germans, including one U.S. Air Force person. He was dead. And then there was a few, probably maybe 45, 50 other people that were still alive, but they were nothing but skin and bones because they were being starved to death. And after just visiting the barracks for a brief period of time, then we went down and visited a shed where it was a holding building where human bodies were stacked like cordwood. And from there, they were burning the bodies into a huge furnace. Then after the bodies were burnt, then they were brought to a pit where you could see bodies that were partially burned, seeing arms and legs. And this was seen by a boy that was 19 years old.
Do you know where these people were from?
They were from all over Europe, because at one time Germany had captured most of France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, even some of the Scandinavian countries. They were up there, and they would, anybody that they would need to help the German war effort, the Germans would take them and put them in, working in factories and making ammunition and airplanes.
And what else do you remember seeing at that camp?
That was the most gruesome. And afterwards, after the war was over with, they tell me, or at least there's stories that indicated that this was supposed to be Hitler's hideout. There was a huge hill very close to the camp, and these forced laborers had to dig tunnels into this mountain. And that was with the idea that this is where Hitler was going to be living after the war was over with.
So do you remember where exactly in Germany that was, around the location?
We just happen to have a little map here. Okay, that would probably be the central part of Germany. I don't know if you can...
Right, I think it'll pick up.
Okay, here's Ohrdruf right here.
So I'm zooming in.
Right here.
So that's where you remember the camp to be?
Yes, that's where the camp was.
Okay. So then how long did you stay at that camp? Or what, I mean, just...
No, that was just a one-day visit. And maybe it was probably 2 or 3 weeks later that the war was over with, that Germany surrendered. And we stayed in Germany probably for, after the war was over with, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then we returned to France. And we stayed in France as an army of occupation. And of course, there was so many soldiers over in the European theater of operation that the U.S. government had to decide, are they going to send them over to Japan or over to the Pacific theater of operation, because we still had to defeat Japan. So I guess that's where our division was deactivated. The 89th Infantry Division was deactivated. And then we wound up being transferred into the 83rd Infantry Division. So then we went back to Germany, and then from Germany over to Austria. So
so and when you came back to Germany, you had gone where again? It was
back to France.
Back to France, okay. And then back to Germany.
Then back to Germany. Then Austria.
Austria with your new division.
That was, we called it USFA, United States Forces in Austria. That was kind of an administrative unit in Austria.
So when you were there in Austria, what did you do?
That was pretty much just paperwork.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about the other people in your unit? Did you make any friends?
Yes. In fact, there was 3 of us that were 18 years of age, and we chummed around together, and they used to call us the 3 Musketeers because of being very young.
And were they people from where you lived? Or?
One was from Oklahoma, and we called him Okie, and the other one was from Nebraska.
And do you remember anything about your officers, or what did you think about your officers?
We had good officers. They were, in fact, a couple of stories when we were in Austria. Things weren't, there was no war going on at that time. So we had a chance to meet Austrian people, and they used to have what they call a 783rd dance band. And we'd go there and meet with some of the Austrian girls. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then this one night, the boy from Nebraska, he had a Jeep and I had a Jeep. So we were working in Linz, Austria. So that was probably about 40 miles from this one town. So as the boy from Nebraska was heading back to his unit, he hit a parked car that was parked without any lights on, and he went airborne into a tree, and I was the first one to come across that automobile accident. And here he was, his head was cut, he had a leg, so I had to put him into my Jeep and bring him to a first aid location in one of the small towns there. That was the last time I saw him. This was, maybe a few days before we were leaving Austria to go home. So he was sent home early, and in September of 1946, I drove a lady to California, from Champion to California, and this fellow that was in that automobile accident, he was still in the hospital, Fitzsimmons Hospital in Denver, Colorado. This was from April until September. So when I was coming back from California, I stopped in to see him, and he still had that bad leg. And then when I went to a Kiwanis meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, he had moved from Nebraska to Phoenix. Well, we used to exchange Christmas cards, so I told him that I'm coming to Phoenix. So we made it a point to get together. And I was very concerned that, am I going to see a fellow with just one leg or what? So as it turned out, he did have a very serious leg injury, but it did heal, and he was limping, but he did not lose his leg. So that was a real joyful reunion. Mm-hmm. Happy reunion.
Did you keep in touch with anyone else after the war?
There's a fellow from New Jersey, Raymond Maciandero. And I have gone to a few Infantry, 89th Infantry Division reunions. And the last one that I did go to was in Washington, D.C. And that was the year that the World War II Veterans Memorial was opened up. And as Betty, my wife, we were walking inside the memorial there, and Betty bumped into this lady. She had an ID badge on. It was Musser. So pretty soon her husband came around, and it was Harry Musser. He was my commanding officer. I hadn't seen him since 1945. So we had a real nice time. And he told me, he says, he often wondered what had happened to me because I spent a lot of time with him in the office. And of course at that reunion, every time if we'd go to dinner, we were at the same table. Mm-hmm. We went to Arlington Cemetery where we had a memorial service. Here we were, side by side. So that was a nice experience. And then another thing about my experience in Washington, D.C., after the war was over with, they had a Holocaust museum. And I made it a point to visit that museum. And the first display that I saw was about the Ohrdruf concentration camp. So that caught my attention right off the bat. And of course, this history book has got some pictures of the concentration camp, some of the bodies that were shown right inside the gate.
Were there casualties in your unit?
No, there was not. No casualties.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I had 4 medals, but I guess one was for good conduct, another one for serving in the European Theater of Operation, and there's 2 others. I don't remember what they are. I've got them listed here if you want that. Let's see. Oh, the American Theater Service Medal, the European African Middle Eastern Theater Service Medal, Good Conduct Medal, Army of Occupation Medal. 4 of them.
So what was your everyday life like? Did you write many letters home? Did people write to you? What did you want to say?
I made it a point of writing a letter to my mother every other day, just to let her know everything was fine.
What was the food like? Did you always have enough food?
Well, the food wasn't the greatest. No, there was, when we first got overseas, we had some of the rations from World War I. They were C rations, and then they were later improved with a K ration. And then, of course, after the war was over with, then the food did improve. I can remember one morning we had cold storage eggs. That was just like fresh eggs for us because we had powdered eggs during the meantime. So there was 3 of us. We each ate 8 eggs. So between the 3 of us, we ate 2 dozen eggs.
What were your other supplies and equipment?
We had a lot of parts for the many different vehicles that was in the 89th Infantry Division. Not anywhere from Jeeps to weapons carriers, 4x4s, and 6x6s.
What were your living conditions like?
As an ordnance company, they were a little bit better than the average infantry soldier.
Were there times when you felt homesick or stressed?
No, I didn't have time because we had, well, that's why you have buddies. And I can remember one of my friends, Okie, from Oklahoma, he got a Dear John letter. You know, and the sad thing is, after the war was over with, I never did hear from Okie. And I don't know what happened to Okie.
And what's his name?
Harold O'Connell.
Okay. From Oklahoma.
Oh, from Oklahoma, yeah.
Did you carry any reminders of home with you?
No, outside of a Bible.
Did you believe in any good luck charms? Well, that would probably be one. Or superstitions?
I believed in God.
What did you do to pass the time? Did you ever go to a USO show?
No, we never, I may have seen one USO show, but without any famous personalities.
Do you remember any pranks or special jokes?
Well, when we went for basic training, there's one fellow from Nagani, Charlie Russo, and he claims that I short-cheated him at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. And I wasn't the one because I didn't know how to short sheet a person. A short sheet is where you fold a blanket or the sheet in half, and when they try to get in bed, there's only just a half a sheet.
Did you ever keep a journal or diary?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did you come home on leave, and where did you go?
before I went overseas, right after basic training, I did come home for 10 days. That was, they called it a delay en route. That was after you finished your basic training, you could go home, and then that's when I was sent to Fort Meade, Maryland, to go overseas as an infantry replacement, which I did not go because I was 18 years old. And then I had one other furlough before our unit went overseas.
Do you remember VE Day and VJ Day when the war ended?
Yes, I do. In fact, I have a picture of me in a Jeep holding the Stars and Stripes. War is over in Germany. And then, of course, the day of that, I do remember we were, I think, around, I don't even remember the town, where all these German soldiers, they were coming in by the hundreds with their arms raised up or white flags where they were surrendering. They were just happy that the war was over, as those of us from the American side.
When did you come home?
I left Austria on April 20th, 1946, and I went to Camp McCoy, and I was discharged from Camp McCoy on May 20th, 1946, and I was home on May 21st, 1946.
So what was it like after the war?
Well, I had a chance. When I went in, everybody was anybody that was in good health was in the Army or Navy or some branch of the armed forces. So that was kind of lonesome before I went in. And then when you come back, they had all been discharged before I was, so it's a nice chance of renewing your friendships with all your friends in Champion.
Did you go to school? Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
I went to school at Northern for a short period of time, but traveling from Champion, and I had a job, so I didn't finish my education.
And where were you living?
I was living with my mother in Humboldton.
And what work did you do? And how did your career develop after that?
Well, I worked with your dad on a construction job for a while, till that job was over with. This was a bridge job. And then we also did some work in the woods. And then I took a civil service exam for working in the post office at Champion, and I was awarded the job. And then when I got word that there's a vacancy at the Market County Road Commission, so I applied there and had an interview, and I got that job, and I spent 39 years with the Market County Road Commission.
And do you belong to any veterans organizations?
I have belonged to the American Legion since May of 1946, still a member.
So you said you had some photos and this book. So this book is what?
That's the history of the 89th Infantry Division, right from the time that it was activated till it was deactivated.
Okay, and that has pictures of the division and history and everything.
Yes,
in it.
as well as some of the war pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is when you arrived at
Ohrdruf.
the concentration camp, and Ohrdruf is Ohrdruf. And this photo is from April 10th, 1945. And just because we don't have others around to tell us, do you remember Walter's experience, what he did, just very generally when he signed up and where he went?
Well, I was discharged in May of 1945, and Brother Walter, he went into the Army in April of 1945, a month before I returned home. And Walter served over in Korea, and he worked as a carpenter. But that's about all I can tell you about his experience.
And that's Walter. What's Walter's middle name?
Edward.
Walter Edward Wentela. And when was he born?
December 23, 1927.
Okay. Do you remember any of the other experiences of our family members when they enlisted or were drafted? Or
Well, I remember well, it'd be my brother-in-law or your grandpa.
Okay, Walfred
Eliasson. Yes, and he served in the Navy, but I don't know any of his experiences. And then he had a brother, Ano, that served. He was up in Alaska.
Okay. And is there anything that we left out that you would like to mention, or are there any memories or experiences that you haven't talked about?
There's one thing I do want to say. You know, the reason why we did have a chance, or we were requested to visit Ohrdruf, is that General Eisenhower knew that after the war was over, many years after the war, World War II was over with, that there would be people that would not believe that the Holocaust actually happened during World War II. And I want to say that I did experience the Holocaust. And let's see, what else do I want to say? Yeah, that's about it.
Did you ever go back to Germany, to that location?
No, I did not.
When you got to the concentration camps, were the German guards there, or they had gone and
they left? They ran.
And so
those that could run and get away.
Did you see any of them? Or?
I did not see any. They were gone by the time we had a chance to view
and then
the premises there.
The people who were alive, did you know if people were helping them, or what? I mean, just kind of drove by.
Well,
them,
they didn't know what to do. They didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, right towards the tail end of the war, you'd see all these people with their buggies or carts or bags. They were walking the highways going back to the countries, because over in Germany, they had forced people from all the different countries to come and work in these different factories, ammunition factories, and probably automotive airplane factories.
And so then they were going back home.
They were going back home.
And didn't have anything.
Didn't have anything, no. It's and all kinds of pushing carts, and it's an awful mess.
Mm-hmm.